Welcome to Camp Constitution Radio with your host, Hal Shurtleff. This program is heard on WBCQ The Planet every Monday evening at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, coming out of beautiful Monticello, Maine. I am the co-founder and camp director of Camp Constitution, which, among other things, runs a wonderful week-long family camp in beautiful Ringe, New Hampshire. This year's camp, 2015, will run from July 12th to the 19th, Sunday afternoon to Sunday morning. And this year, we're very pleased to announce we're going to have some great speakers, like we do every year, speakers and guest lecturers. Mrs. Chris Ann Hall, who does a phenomenal job teaching the Constitution to young people. She'll be returning from, she was there last year. We're going to have Garrett Lear, the Patriot Pastor, as another instructor, and he may even bring his working musket, and we'll have a musket demonstration like we had last year. And we're very pleased to have, for the first time at our camp this year, will be Tom DeWeese, who's the president and founder of the American Policy Center. Tom, are you there?
I'm here, Hal.
Well, I'm honored and pleased that we're able to have you on our show. And now, Tom, I'm just going to give you a quick little introduction, and then fill in. When I finish, you can add whatever you like about your background. But Tom is one of the voices. He was a voice in the wilderness, along with a few other groups fighting Agenda 21 back in the 1990s. Is probably one of the nation's foremost experts on the subject, as well as many other issues, Common Core, the reasons why Article 5 Convention is a bad idea, UN treaties, and so forth. So welcome to the show, and tell us a little about yourself and your organization.
All right. Well, my organization is American Policy Center. We've been around since about 1986, and as you said, we've been working on the Agenda 21 issues since really from the beginning. I started working directly with Henry Lamb, who is basically the man who discovered it and started teaching the rest of us about it. And we put on 10 national conferences under the guise of Freedom 21 to train people to fight it and so forth. We work on not only that issue and protection of private property rights, but we've been heavily involved in fighting for personal privacy rights and fighting all the changes that are going on in the education system, fighting those since the 90s, and illegal immigration, all those kind of things. I like you, I believe that all this stuff comes together under one umbrella, and one thing leads to the other. But I think Agenda 21 is the agenda for all of it. They call it a comprehensive blueprint, and if we can stop it, I think we can stop a lot of the rest of it.
Well, let's give the listeners a little background on Agenda 21. Now, this show broadcasts out of Maine, where we had a very great victory about 4 years ago, something called Gateway 1, that was defunded by the state of Maine, thanks to some patriots who just simply approached the governor, LePage, who got reelected, and he said, I don't like this, and he defunded it. The organization Gateway 1 still exists, and I've given numerous presentations in the state. I actually think you came up to Maine, in 06, 07, along with Dr. Kaufman, Michael Kaufman, and a few other people, right?
I believe we did, yeah.
Yes, I think that was sort of an early, lots of people became aware of it, because a lot of folks didn't even know what it was. So give a little background on Agenda 21, how it impacts not just people will say, well, that's not in my neighborhood. I would probably beg to differ. So give us a little background on Agenda 21.
Yeah, well, this Agenda 21 came together as a culmination of a lot of other things. As I said, we were working on these things earlier than even 92 when Agenda 21 was introduced. There's a bunch of non-governmental organizations that work inside the UN as official. That's an official designation. That's not just anybody. You have to be designated as an NGO, and they're able to work in the back rooms and come up with plans. And
now, when you're an NGO, when your group is an NGO, the UN you basically have to agree with the founding principles of the organization in order to be granted such a status.
Yeah, there's a big application you have to fill out, and the NGO status is actually mentioned in the charter. So it is an official designation. What happens is these NGOs basically get equal level with influence with elected officials and heads of state, and not heads of state, but other representatives inside the UN process. So they are serious actors there, and there are movements inside the UN to create a, I think what they call it, the Council of the People or something like that, and they that would be our representatives in the world would now be, instead of your elected officials, that would, under their idea, would be these NGO groups, the Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, the Audubon Society, the National Education Association. All these groups are these NGO groups. Well, anyway, they work in the back scenes, and they put these documents together that end up being presented at these big international conferences where the heads of state come and they sign on to them with great fanfare and say, yeah, we're all for this. Well, they put their private ideas, agendas in there, and these radical environmental groups particularly, and very socialist groups, have this idea of creating global governance and making all the decisions for our lives. And step by step, through several of these meetings, they put together a document that was introduced in 1992 at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro that was called Agenda 21, Agenda for the 21st Century, a blueprint. In fact, the proponents of this have continuously called it a comprehensive blueprint, and it is for the reorganization of human society. If you go back and you find the communists, the Soviet Union and so forth, tried to sell communism to us by telling us about the genius of Karl Marx. We weren't buying it. It didn't. We didn't take it. But the idea came about of environmental Armageddon, that if we don't start protecting the environment, then we'll have no world to stand on. Doesn't matter how many liberties you think you have. And this became the mantra for it, environmental Armageddon, the excuse. But yet what Agenda 21 really talks about, if you look in the chapters of it, you've got chapters on empowering women, on labor unions, on young people, on education. What does that have to do with the environment? Because it's not about the environment.
I remember one of the NGOs, not the Audubon Society, but one of the big environmental organizations, had a little pamphlet called "Empowering Women." And I'm thinking, what does this have to do with the environment? And the bottom line is that having too many children is a serious threat, overpopulation in their minds. So the idea is to destroy the family, the concept of mother, father, children. And that's what the Empower Women comes from.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, you mentioned population. This is a major tenet of their plan, of Agenda 21. The
Nature Conservancy. I'm sorry, the Nature Conservancy. That was the group I was thinking of.
Yeah. They are the largest of these NGO groups, and they really are massively wealthy from all these activities that they've been involved in. But the population, they're looking at, they want to reduce the population. In some cases, I've heard some numbers as low as 200 or 300 million people in the world. And they want everything to be wilderness, and they keep talking about we need to live on less. They have attacked the United States particularly, but any of the industrialized world, that we cannot uphold this kind of industrialization or this kind of development, and you've got to live on less. And if you follow their ideas step by step by step, they're pushing us backwards. And we used to laugh in the 70s about them, and we'd say environmentalists, they're cave dwellers, and let them freeze in the dark. But now they want all of us to freeze in the dark in the cave.
Maurice Strong was one of the key players at the Rio conference, and I believe he made a speech in front of this session. It was thousands of people, 25, 30,000 people?
50,000 people.
50,000. And he claimed the biggest threat to the United States isn't the nuclear missiles being pointed at us. The biggest threat to the world, it's the American middle class.
Yeah.
And nobody seemed to refute him. Most Americans applauded him for saying that.
Yeah, and you see this attack on the middle class today. All these policies to destroy the middle class, and I mean, they keep talking about the 1%, but that middle class is in those numbers. And Obama's talking about raising taxes on the wealthy, and we're going to help the middle class. Well, what do they call the middle class? If you're earning a couple $100,000 a year, you're not wealthy. You're in the middle class. And but that's where they focus on taxing. The attack through Agenda 21 and through these other policies that they put together are all on capitalism, all on free markets. That is all, just as you said, Maurice Strong was saying, this is the enemy. This is what we've got to get away with. I challenge anybody to take all of the words that they have said, all of the agenda that they've put together, and tell me the difference between that and Marxism. Because I can't find it. It's an attack on private property. It's an attack on free markets. It's an attack on the middle class. And that is what they're putting in place here, using the excuse of the environment. As soon as they came up with that, then Americans who had refused to give up liberties under communism started to say, oh, well, we've got to do it. And they started throwing their liberties on the bonfire like a good old-fashioned book burning. And that's what we continue to do. And what's the result of that? We are getting poorer. The middle class is beginning to disappear. We have more strife. We have more trouble in our lives. And it's all as this encroachment comes on. Property rights are disappearing, private property, and step by step it's being put in place. Well, what happened here, just to carry it out, I mean, people say, oh, come on. They started using the term where it used to be a comprehensive blueprint. Now it's an innocuous 20-year-old document that hasn't got any teeth, doesn't mean anything.
Right.
What are you worried about?
It's interesting that they'll say that 50,000 people from all over the world got down to Rio de Janeiro and they sat around and threw balloons out of hotel windows, water balloons. No, they had an agenda. And I think the fact that it wasn't a treaty or an agreement makes it more dangerous. It's what they call soft law. So now George Bush signed it. Daddy Bush signed it. He came back to the United States and said, our federal government's going to implement this. And they started to do that. And Bill Clinton, did he set up the Office of Sustainable Development? The White House Office of
the President's Council on Sustainable Development, and then he did set up an Office of Environmental Quality, I believe. It was
and he hired the American Planning Association to come up with a way to implement Agenda 21 locally, all over the United States.
Yeah, every single city in America practically has one of their chapters working there.
Can you give me some names of some of the players in the United States, some of the top people that may be known to the listeners? Of course, this show's all over the world, but and this is a worldwide problem. But most of the focus is in the industrialized nations, the nations like the United States and Western European nations. But can you give us the name of some of the top proponents of the Agenda 21 in this country?
Well, I'll tell you, it's almost universal in elected officials that are putting these things in place. Of course, the governor of New York State, Cuomo, is one of the worst.
One of the top guys, yes.
One of the top guys in putting that in place, and
his background is with the HUD, Housing and Urban Development, a federal entity, which had been abolished many years ago, and that is one of the key organizations that's implementing this in communities all over the country. Yeah,
they have, in fact, one of the runner-up meetings that I was talking about, HUD, what was it called? My mind just went blank. Habitat 2. I've got a document that was a draft document that was prepared by HUD for Habitat 2, which was one of the runner-ups to eventually becoming Agenda 21, talking about how we need to eliminate roads and scrape up the asphalt and somehow turn it into fertilizer, and having tool sheds and for farming implements, and everything is a collective farm. That's where our food will come from. If you look at these plans for smart growth, for what how they want the cities to end up, you end up with these massive mega cities where, and out in the rural areas, there's nothing. And what are the farms? The farms are areas right around the edges of that smart growth boundary on the city. It's a collective farm, and every city is supposed to grow its own food. That's what they call sustainable. And I ask people all the time, when we talk about this, do you like bananas? And they go, yeah. I said, well, kiss them goodbye. If you don't grow in your community, you're going to live on what's there. Well, this is feudalism. And and the other interesting thing here, how when you get into the farming of it, the perfect sustainable tractor that they actually promote, is a team of oxen. I've got a photograph from Michigan State University where they were having an ag expo there, and they brought out this team of oxen to show how to pull the plow. The photo has all these farmers standing around with their arms folded saying, what is this? There, you may well know, up in Vermont, there's a college up there that teaches sustainable farming. They've got an entire herd of oxen up there.
It's in South Royalton, Vermont Law School in South Royalton, Vermont.
Yeah.
The word sustainable, now, that's not a bad word in itself. I think that all of us have to engage in sustainable practices. I mean, you have a business, you do things that keep your business, the doors open, so you have to sustain itself. You have a budget, you have to live within that budget to sustain your financial abilities and so forth. But they've redefined that word. Can you kind of explain what they mean when they say sustainable? What do they mean by it? The Agenda 21 supporters.
They mean less energy, less less of everything. As I said before, cutting back on energy use, cutting back on any kind of development, getting rid of cars, anything like that. It's all designed supposedly to cut back our carbon footprint. But the fact is, if you don't have a carbon footprint, you're dead.
You're dead. So, that's correct. Yes.
You live on the earth. That's what happens. And but they want everything completely zero, that nothing happens. So it's less industry, less of everything that makes our lives better. It's the reason, our development in our science and healthcare and everything in the past is the reason why we live longer than we used to and aren't dead at 40. And, of course, all those things go against what they call sustainable. It's all based on the earth, whether the earth is sustainable, not people, not communities, not human civilization. And, if you're talking about sustainable, the most sustainable industry we have is the timber industry, for example, because they know if they go in and clear cut and cut everything down, their product's going to last 10 days. But they've got to replant, and so 30 years from now, here's another growth of trees that we can go back in and cut. It's a crop, and they treat it as a crop.
And they've been doing this for many generations without any help from the UN.
Yeah, and if they didn't do that, they wouldn't be there. But
now, one of the things that our friend and colleague Dr. Michael Kaufman has pointed out, he's a true environmental scientist, by the way.
Yes.
He lives in Bangor, Maine. Probably been we'll have him on sometime soon. He's also been an instructor at Camp Constitution several years ago. He said that the Northeast 100 years ago was pretty much deforested. He said since then, because of environmentally good things like coal and oil, we don't have to use trees for furniture as much or for firewood as much. As a result of that, and because of improved farming techniques and other innovations, thanks to the free market, the forests have come back. He said we're about 90% reforested.
Yeah, it's true. We got more trees now than probably any time in the U.S. history. And another thing that adds to that is automobiles, because we don't have to have as much land cleared for all the horses that
right.
we used to have to support. So, again, all these things.
Well, you mentioned horses. Can you imagine a big city, any New York City or Boston, with horses? Now, I love horses, right? My daughter, my 10-year-old's taking lessons on how to ride these things. But can you imagine the mess that would be there, and how unhealthy it would be? The droppings in the summertime. I remember reading an essay on that. He said the flies were terrible, the sparrows, the population was miserable. It was just a mess. And then in the springtime, in the wet season, it was mucky. You'd get it all over your clothes. You'd breathe it in when it got really dry and made you sick. It was unsustainable environment back then when we had to rely on horses to pull our carts and pull our wagons. And thanks to the internal combustion engine, and that internal combustion engine, since Henry Ford's assembly line, has become a whole lot more efficient and a whole lot cleaner. I would think I want to go back to and bicycles. This is another thing too. I've noticed a lot the last couple of years. I'm driving on a busy road, maybe 2 lanes and a little narrow at that, and I see a bicycle stenciled on the street. A bunch of these things. And can you explain what people see that? What does that mean? What's going on here when people see these things?
Well, what it's about, these are part, by the way, of these grant programs, particularly out of HUD. When a community accepts grant programs from the federal government, which, by the way, were basically written by the same NGOs that created Agenda 21, they then went into the federal government and got these grant programs. And when a community accepts those grants for some other reason, revitalizing downtown or something like that, comes with all these regulations. And one of them, in many cases, is that you have to incorporate bike lanes in the streets. What they're preparing for here is that you won't be driving cars; you're going to be riding bikes, and looking like some kind of a Chinese city that you see on the news with all these thousands of bicycles running. That's what they envision. That's what they want, to get rid of the cars, making it more difficult to drive on the roads because, as you said, it's much more narrow trying to get down through it. They do all kinds of things to discourage you. Now they're starting to eliminate parking spaces. They're starting to eliminate even parking garages and stuff in apartment buildings, things that you don't have a car. And the idea is that you live in one little area, and you go to this, you can walk to the store or ride your bike. You can go to the post office right there. You live right there. Your job is right there. You never leave the neighborhood. Maybe don't leave the building. And this is what they call smart growth. And of course, the excuse for all of this is to cut back on energy use. But let me share this with you. I have a report from 2012 from the American Planning Association, not the American Policy Center, the American Planning Association. They did a report on smart growth, trying to decide is it a good thing or not. This is the final paragraph in that report. It says, quote, "The current planning policy strategies for land use and transportation have virtually no impact on the major long-term increases in resource and energy consumption." In other words, it doesn't mean anything. All these rules and regulations they're forcing us to live under now and all this planning, it doesn't work. It doesn't mean anything.
Well, they're being honest for a change in one of the reports, huh?
Rare, yeah. And now I tried to download that yesterday. I already had a copy of it, but for somebody else that's trying to download it, you can't do it now. All of a sudden.
Oh, that's why the screenshots are a great thing. And in fact, I just got a wind of Mr. Mark Meckler, who's one of the big supporters of Article 5 convention. And you say things are all interconnected. So someone mentioned he's participating in this entity called livingroomconversations.org. So I've done a little search and mentioned that Van Jones, the environmentalist that was rejected by that was appointed by Obama, had chosen him to be the energy czar, and then he was, because of his Communist Party affiliation, he withdrew his nomination. So he shows up with Mark Meckler at this, who was supposed to be a Tea Party conservative, but there was a link. New Hampshire Listens had a link to the Living Room Connections. New Hampshire Listens is one of these entities out of University of New Hampshire that conducts these Delphi technique meetings that go around New Hampshire, getting people to, the people that come into a town, and the people think, oh, they're listening to me, they're really paying attention, and they have their little facilitators, and they think that when they leave, they think the plan that's been implemented top down somehow people had something to do with it. So it's very interesting how it's sort of all interconnected here.
Yeah, it does. And those facilitated meetings, they'll tell you all the time, we had public meetings, everybody was there, these are all local ideas, everybody came up with them. That facilitator is trained in psychology to control a crowd and drive it to a predetermined outcome. And if he's really good at his job, when he's done, everybody in the place thought it was all their idea.
Their idea, that's right.
Yeah, that's how
dangerous these things are, yes. Yep. Tell us a little bit about ICLEI, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiative.
Yeah. ICLEI was created, it's got the closest ties to the UN of probably any of the organizations working on this. And they helped write Agenda 21. They were kind of created to promote this thing, and they made it their mission to go into every community in the world and bring in software, they bring in training programs. They train the employees at City Hall. They set for the City Hall, for the employees to only look at things in a certain way, which would be Agenda 21 policies, sustainable development. And they're the ones that create the goals for energy use and density and all these kind of things. They set those.
How a community can lower its so-called carbon footprint.
Exactly. Yeah, and and the communities pay them dues to be a member of ICLEI, and then that's when ICLEI comes in. And up until a few years ago, up until 2011. They had at least 650 American cities. Their goal in another couple of years was to have 1,000 American cities that were paying them dues. And that's when we started to target them. And it was easy to target ICLEI because they had those closest ties to the UN. Some of the other ones, it was a little harder to make the connection. And that started to take effect. And we now have succeeded in getting at least 150 cities in the country to stop paying them dues. And I was told by a close associate of mine that the head of ICLEI USA told him, not knowing who he was, that they are terrified of what is happening and what we're doing to them because they can't get any new cities to join them. And
wow.
They don't know what to do.
Well, what's interesting, on their website, their international website, you used to be able to go on the site, click United States, and then state by state, and then list all the towns and cities. So it was sort of like, okay, what city are we going to target? What town are we going to go into and start educating people? Now you go to the website, and it will say the state, and you click the state. Let's say New York, and it will say 50 members. And many of these states, some of these towns have pulled out, but they'll still be listed, or at least be considered. And we had fun in Belfast, Maine. We picked two off in Belfast, in Maine, and we were told after our educational efforts that the town has not renewed its membership, and yet they'll still be listed. So we'll call up ICLEI and say, hey, you got to drop Belfast. Oh, they didn't like that, and they would drop it. So we only have about 2 minutes left. It's the shortest half hour in radio. So tell us how people can get a hold of your organization.
Yeah, we're the American Policy Center. Our website is americanpolicy.org. And one of the things we are doing on the website, we've got all kind of tools we've created, and I've got an archive of articles and all that. One of the things, as you well know, because you were on with us, we've been putting on these webinars on how to stop Agenda 21, and you can go on the website. They're archived there. They're free. You can go in and watch them. Just go in the AmericanPolicy.org and click at the top where it says webinars. You can go into it. And just last week, I did our latest one, and at that time, I introduced a 5-point plan on how to combat Agenda 21, and we've got a budget to try to raise some money to do that. And if you go into the website and into the archives, you can watch that program and see what we're talking about. And we've created a second website called apcmoneybomb.com, and you can go in there and see all the details on how to help us do this. But one of the things we're doing is reaching out to the general public that hasn't heard any of this. They don't know what we're talking about tonight. And we have created, or in the process of creating, an ad very similar to those ones you see on television, about the dogs and the cats being, so oppressed and so forth, and people get, very emotional about it. I started thinking, what about all the people in the country who are victims of these programs, having their shattered dreams of their property ripped out from under them? And so we got a song called Shattered Dreams. We're creating an ad that depicts all that. And our plan is to get those on the air and begin to tell people who've never heard any of this stuff what the victims are of this.
All right. Well, Tom, it's been a pleasure, and we're looking forward to having you at a Camp Constitution this summer, July 12th. I don't know how be it for the whole week or a few days, but thank you, and God bless.
My pleasure.
And thanks for listening.
All right. Bye-bye.